7 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm in my car outside of high school, hoping I can blend in with the Gen Zers. Because I'm taking the SAT. Why would I do this to myself and the Gen Zers? Well, one, I heard it's easier, so I thought I'd take this one and then one from the 80s to compare them. But two, I'm also an economics professor at a college, and as we debate whether to reinstate the test, I wanted to make a video where I examine it. Where did the test come from? Does it measure intelligence or your parents' income? Is it actually too easy now? And why are colleges starting to bring it back just a few years after they got rid of it? And no cameras allowed, no phones allowed, so I'll see you in 2 hours and 14 minutes. That's apparently how long it is now. This is James Conant, maybe most famous for overseeing the Manhattan Project. Where did he learn to deal with toxicity and massive egos? His previous job, president of Harvard. Conant wanted a true American meritocracy where the best and brightest rose to the top. Then he wanted whatever wealth they accumulated to be confiscated upon death, a 100% inheritance tax. That way the cycle could begin again, where the best and brightest of the next generation would rise to the top. Predictably, he had a hard time convincing the rich of the give everything away idea. In fact, he couldn't even convince himself, leaving his sons a sizable inheritance. But he did make progress on the give everyone a better chance part of his vision. In the 1930s, he added an admissions test to Harvard. The idea was to test for intelligence. Forget your dad's yacht or donated building, they wanted smart kids. And the test worked. Middle and lower class kids admitted via the test did well at Harvard. Soon the test spread everywhere, and this test was the SAT. So the atom bomb and the SAT, that is quite the legacy. I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but he definitely left his mark. In the mid to late 20th century, things around the SAT started to get weird. A test designed to measure intelligence started to make people uncomfortable, make them nervous. And I'm nervous about it. See, I'm recording this part 2 weeks after I took the test, and I just got an email that has my score. I'm like legitimately nervous. Like, I don't know, you can't hear my heart racing, but it is because, like, what if my score isn't that great? In high school, I didn't do that great, and I blame that on the fact I couldn't concentrate because I was sitting next to my crush. Shout out to Meg Murakami, I'm not sure where she is now. But now I'm a college professor, and it's like basically my job description to be smart. The nervousness that I'm feeling that this score is like a verdict on my self-worth is, one of the reasons why the SAT moved away from saying, hey, that's what this is. So let's get back to the video and I'll tell you what they did. The SAT did what any company does facing controversy: rebrand. See, the A stands for aptitude, which is a smart person's word for smarts. So they said, all right, it doesn't stand for aptitude anymore, it stands for assessment. But then a smart person pointed out that assessment is a smart person's word for test. So the SAT had just renamed itself Scholastic Test. In response, the SAT said, fine, we're just the SAT now. The SAT can be whatever you want. By 2004, the College Board, the people who run the SAT, said, yes, this test was originally designed to measure intelligence, but now we've redesigned it and it measures reasoning ability. Reasoning ability, of course, is a smart person's way of saying, yeah, this thing still measures intelligence, but we don't want people who score poorly to feel bad. Yeah, that's not great. Still feel bad. But is it really an IQ test? Well, there's this idea in social science called the G factor, general intelligence. It dates all the way back to 1904, when Charles Spearman noticed that people's scores on different tests were highly correlated. The main paper on the subject finds that indeed the SAT lines up very closely with other tests of general intelligence. So this paper says, yeah, it's basically an IQ test. And yet, $500 million says it's not. That is the size of the SAT prep industry. But if the SAT is a test of fixed ability, the tutoring should barely matter, but the prep must work. $500 million can't be wrong, right? Yeah, it's wrong, says the research. The research says that the effect of tutoring is between 4 and 30 points per section. So the max that it could boost your score is 60 points. And that's very awkward because 60 points is the SAT's own estimate of statistical noise, meaning if somebody takes it multiple times, 60 points is the amount their score is going to vary just naturally. Meaning the effect of tutoring is about the same as random luck. But 60 points is small in a scientific sense, but not necessarily in an admissions sense. At the top end, 60 points might be the difference between Harvard and not Harvard. For me personally, a 60-point boost would have put me in range of my dream school. Shout out to Caltech, where hopefully my son will go. No pressure, Dean. So the tutoring actually might be worth it for those kids vying for the top schools. But the totality of the research says prep doesn't matter much, and this is mostly an innate ability test. Which is a problem for me since my score is not what I had hoped for. So I had to say this for the sake of the video and for the sake of myself. Your innate ability does not determine your self-worth. We all deserve the same amount of dignity. I'm not the smartest person at my university. That's okay. I'm probably not the smartest person in my house either. I have to focus on the things I can control, like being a good teacher, collecting Lego, and being a good father.
What are you laughing for? You think Caltech's funny? You don't go to Caltech, you'd be sleeping on the streets. You like a street? You want to sleep on the street?
Love the street.
But also, maybe your score is not as definitive as the research would suggest, because there's a problem with all these papers. I noticed it when researching this video. Look at all these papers. Do you see the problem? Most of the work is pre-2005, and the work after 2005 are meta-analyses relying on pre-2005 data or studies. Why does that matter? What happened in 2005? Besides Meg Murakami marrying a multimillionaire and not me. In 2005, the SAT totally changed. All these studies are for a test that doesn't exist anymore. Under pressure from the California schools, and because the ACT was eating into its market share, the College Board redesigned the SAT in 2005 and then again in 2016. They removed analogies, cut the multiple choice answers from 5 down to 4. They made the test shorter and removed the penalty for guessing. Then they adjusted the scales to make the high scores more common. I guess what I'm trying to say is they made it easier, way easier, which creates a pretty obvious problem. If the test changed so much, do all these studies on the G factor and the uselessness of tutoring still hold? And the answer is, who knows? Recent research is sparse, but don't worry, I'm a professional economist. I could do my own research. It's why I took the recent SAT disguised as a Gen Zer. I got these, doodle tattoos that they have. I got the necklace. I got this shirt that I've seen them wear. I guess they get sick a lot. Yeah, so it turns out I actually didn't need to disguise myself. They let anyone take the test. And my disguise was what economists call a negative externality. Very sorry for the students around me who were nervous to take the exam, but also had to deal with the cognitive burden of wondering why there was an old dude sitting next to them. All right, so we're done with the disguise and we're done with the 2026 version of the SAT. Now I needed to find an old version, take that to compare it to the new version. Luckily, the internet has one from 1985, so I downloaded that, printed it out, put up a do not disturb sign, and I was off. So 3 hours and many interruptions later, I had my score, and the 1985 exam was not what I expected. I wanted some other opinions, so I cruised by my local high school to see if I could find some seniors to take the old exam.
Hey, you want to hop in and take a test? I got cough syrup here. You guys like that stuff? No? This is a terrible idea.
Luckily, I'm also a college professor, so I had some former students I've worked with, Valet and Andrew, take the 1985 test. Our experience did not match up what people say about the new SAT at all. Yes, we all scored higher or the same on the new one versus the old one, but that's because they recentered the scores in the 90s. In terms of percentiles, our scores between the old and new were roughly similar. But we thought the new one was actually harder.
Math section is much harder today than it was in 1985.
And I literally ran out of time on the math. Like the math, it just my computer just zapped. It was like, sorry, you're out. And I was like, what the heck?
The old verbal section did have much longer passages, but it wasn't noticeably harder. And further, all of us agreed that actually tutoring would matter more for the old test.
It's more vocab heavy on the old version. So I think that's more something you can prep for versus the recent test is more like logic based. And I think that's something that's more difficult to prep for.
So yes, it is a very different test.
It was certainly different.
But it's not easier.
Both math sections added up in 10 minutes for the 1981. The most recent one, I was almost running out of time too. So
sample size of 3. We've debunked the myths, or we've debunked the conception about the new SAT. And your generation's not soft. The SAT is harder.
But what we really should care about is not if it's harder or easier, gameable or less gameable, but whether it's still useful. Can it still serve its original purpose of identifying smart kids from underprivileged backgrounds? To test that, we would need a natural experiment where a lot of colleges all of a sudden got rid of the SAT. And that's exactly what happened in the pandemic. You remember the pandemic when everything became optional: hygiene, haircuts, sobriety, and testing. Almost all selective colleges switched to test optional. A lot of people had wanted that policy for years because on average, poor students do worse on the SAT. So they figured removing it should help level the playing field. And that gives us a clean prediction. If the SAT mostly measures tutoring and access to resources, removing it should help poor, smart students get into college. It didn't. The policy hurt bright, disadvantaged students the most. Under test optional, many first-generation students were confused. They didn't know what to do with their scores. For those that scored over 1,500, 30% didn't even submit them. So colleges were rejecting underprivileged students they would have accepted under the old system. And despite what some media outlets may tell you, actual sound research shows that nothing predicts college success better than the SAT. The SAT correlates highly with college GPA. But it doesn't stop at college. SAT scores predict post-college success better than GPA. High scorers were more likely to attend elite graduate schools and make it into the top 1% of earners. Now, it's true that rich kids do better on average than poor kids on the SAT, but the SAT is a lot less gameable than everything else that goes into a college app, like GPA, essays, donations, letters of rec, weird rich people sports, steeplechase, dressage, anyone? Which is why a lot of colleges are drifting back towards requiring the SAT. With a test optional policy, we were unintentionally overlooking applicants from less resourced backgrounds. A 1,400 SAT score from an applicant whose high school has an SAT mean of 1,000 gives us valuable information about that applicant's ability to excel in their environment. This is going to be a first from econ nerds. I'm actually quoting a college president and agreeing with them. The pandemic-induced test optional experiment showed that despite the controversies, the overhaul, the rebrand, the SAT still does the one thing it set out to do. See, rich kids still have an advantage, but when you remove the test, you don't remove the inequality. You remove the one thing that lets admissions see through that inequality. Poor students with high scores disappeared from elite applicant pools, replaced by essays, extracurriculars, and equestrian enthusiasts. Now, you may not like the SAT.
I may not like the SAT.
But it's not for me. It's for the brilliant poor kid to show that he or she deserves a chance.
And I need to let my own SAT scores go because, let's face it, I was about as likely to get into Caltech as I was to end up with Meg Murakami. So if you like this video and want to see me do other weird stuff in the name of economics, check out the other videos on the channel. I recommend the Cybertruck one where I get a Cybertruck and almost ruin my marriage for economics. Now, if you made it this far and you're wondering, hey, is this guy ever going to tell me what he got on the SAT in this SAT video? Well, it's tough because it's kind of weird to reveal your SAT scores publicly and imagine that I score higher than you. Well, you're going to think I'm like a pompous jerk for lording it over you, but then imagine I scored lower than you, then you're going to be like, why should I listen to this guy on economics? He scored lower than me on the SAT. And I don't really think the scores matter to the narrative of the video. It's more about taking those tests and comparing them. But if you must know, I'm fine telling you what they are. Just DM me on Substack and I'll let you know.